My great-grandmother, Dorothy Parker was her name. She died in her 90s, and she was also an avid gardener. She gardened for much of her life. During the Second World War, she had a garden because there was a culture of gardening, and during that global conflict, the US government was promoting gardening and telling everyone to raise victory gardens in their backyards. And many, many, many Americans gardened because those vegetables would be given to the US military to feed the troops. So my great-grandmother Dorothy, she was an avid gardener, and she gardened all the way up to her old age. Now, in her 90s, obviously she didn't garden, but before that, in her 70s, she gardened. And she came from a culture that believed in growing food. Even if you have a little bit of space, you grew food. And if you look at the generation that came after hers, they really got into lawns, nice, beautiful green lawns. And from that, Americans have really forgotten the glories, the beauty of gardening, the principle of gardening. They'll say, well, I can just buy vegetables from the store. I can go outside and I can just go to the store. I don't have to go outside of my backyard. And so they have forgotten the principle of gardening because they have put money and profit over the beauties of life, really, because one of the beauties of life is growing food. We forget that we are Earth. We are Earth. The ancients understood this. There's a story that you can read in which a European meets with a Native American somewhere, I want to say somewhere in North America. I don't remember exactly where. But this European was talking to this Native American, and the European was asking questions about how the Native Americans saw the creation of the world. Like what was his creation story? And this Native American, this Native Indian, told this European that we believe that the Creator took clay and breathed the breath of life into it and made man. Which really goes to show that the idea of God taking earth and breathing into it and making man from the earth, this was a very, very ancient belief that could be found in numerous ancient civilizations and cultures. I'm not saying that their religions are true and that Christianity is just a universal religion. But what I'm saying is that at one point in time, ancient man all understood this. Now, those ancient beliefs in those ancient religions could have been corrupted, but still, it's like the flood. The flood is a universal story in antiquity. So, we are Earth. And what is Earth? Like you dig into the Earth, what do you find? You find potassium, nitrogen, sodium, calcium, phosphorus. You find all of these things in the Earth. What is the human body made of? Nitrogen, sodium, calcium, phosphate. All these things that are found in the soil are found in us. We are Earth. And when we die, we disintegrate into compost. We go back to what we used to be. And from the earth we came, and going back to the earth we shall go. So, how do we get our sustenance? Because we are earth, we have to get our sustenance from the earth. How do we get it? We can't eat soil. How do we do it? Vegetables. Vegetables suck, literally, they suck the sustenance of the earth. And we, from the plants, take the sustenance of the earth. Vegetables are, and I've heard this said before, I don't remember who said this, but vegetables are straws. They are straws that we use to suck up the sustenance of the earth, because we are earth. But we don't really have this appreciation for gardening. We don't have this appreciation for the earth. We don't. We don't have this appreciation. Even though we are earth, we act as though we're not. We act as though we are superhumans, or, we act like we don't really need to garden. We can just go out to eat. We go to the drive-thru. We go out to restaurants, things like that. And so that culture of eating out, I've talked about this in one of my prior videos, but that culture of eating out has made us lose our connection to the earth and to where we come from. It made us lose the connection with the source of all life, which is ultimately God, but God made the earth, and the earth is the only planet that has life. And so from the earth we came, physically speaking. And even though our great-grandparents gardened, the children that our great-grandparents had, a lot of them lost the culture of gardening and the appreciation of gardening, and their children, a lot of them have completely forgot it, don't care. The good thing is that millennials, a lot of millennials like myself, have gotten into gardening, and you can see there is a huge movement on the internet that has arisen in the last 10 years or so of going back to gardening, and forget lawns don't even feed us. So the good news is that a lot of us are leaving that boomer and pre-boomer culture, and or really the boomer culture, and going back to, in some ways, back to the thinking that our great-grandparents had. One thing that I've noticed, though, is that other cultures, not all of them, but other cultures will appreciate gardening more so than English-speaking cultures. So, for example, when I was in Italy, there were gardens everywhere. Like, you could walk by a neighborhood, and you can walk past these small little Italian homes, and they had gardens, little front yards with gardens. They would be growing cardoons. And if you don't know what cardoons are, they are basically a cousin of artichoke, but they would also grow artichokes, and they'll grow onions and tomatoes and eggplants and parsley and all, different herbs and things like that. People garden. Asians will garden. Asian Americans will garden. Slavic people, even in the US, will garden. Slavic people in Slavic countries garden. Russia has a huge culture of gardening. That's why every Russian you talk to, they have a dacha. They have a grandma who gardens, and then during the vacation time, they will go to the dacha and live there, and they will live off of the garden. Slavic people will garden. Balkan people will garden. I remember years ago talking to a lady, she was from the Dominican Republic, and she told me everyone in the Dominican Republic has some sort of an appreciation for gardening, and many Dominicans garden. And they said even if you see a Dominican with a small house and a small lot of land, they will use that land up. Chef Mario Battelli has talked about this in regards to Italian culture, and he says that if you go to Italy, they don't like to waste any sort of open land, and even if they have a little square space of land, they'll use it to garden. And it's not just gardening, but also shopping. How we shop reflects our culture. Balkan people, they understand what to buy. Asians understand what to buy. Middle Eastern people understand what to buy. A lot of Mediterranean folks understand what to buy. Even those who've been living in the U.S. for most of their life, they will have an understanding of this sort of stuff. We can learn something from foreigners. We may sit here and bash them and say, oh, they're invading our country, but we can learn something from them. I remember, and I'm not saying all Americans are like this. Most Americans are, but they are, a good section of the American population that are into gardening. People who live in the countryside, people who live in the Appalachian Mountains, they will garden, and that's good. We need to go to that culture. We need to go back to the culture of our great-grandparents. Not our grandparents for the most part, because a lot of our grandparents got into lawns, and that's all just a bunch of BS. But one thing that I fear about this coronavirus is that it can cause stigma against certain people, because we'll say, oh, foreigners are bringing coronavirus. But we can learn something from the coronavirus. We can learn, and we have to, I know that sounds crazy, but we can find something positive in almost any bad situation. We can learn about the importance of simplicity. We can learn about the importance of going back to that life that our grandparents lived, and it's not that bad. Buy dried beans. Stock up on those things. Stock up on flour. A lot of Americans, you know, they get into this Mad Max mentality and they're like, oh, I'm just going to buy a lot of bottled water. Balkan people are like, I buy flour, I stay home now. I have flour. And, you know, it's hard to tell people to stay at home and live in simplicity. To stay at home. People who are in the CDC, people who are health experts, people who are virologists, people who are experts on viruses and how they spread, they'll say, stay home. It makes our job a lot easier because it's going to curtail the spread of this virus. But if you tell people that, it's like, well, you know, not everyone has not everyone can like live the life of staying home. You know, a lot of us have jobs and everything. Yeah, but you know what? Your life is more important than your job. Stock up on food big time. Flour, dried beans, canned food, and garden. And live a more simple life. And here's the thing, this coronavirus thing is eventually going to pass over. And you're probably going to have something much worse than coronavirus pop up eventually. But even when there is no virus to worry about, if we live a simple life because of coronavirus, even when there's no virus to worry about, we should still continue to live that life. Because when the pandemic then strikes, we'll be ready. We'll be ready. So anyway, garden and live a simple life. Our world is changing dramatically. The comfortable bubble that we've been so used to for these decades, it's popping. And I'm not saying it could pop any day. It's popping. That bubble is being popped. Because not only are we going to have to face viruses and pandemics, we're also going to have to face global conflict. That's inevitable. So, go back to simplicity. And you'll be much happier. Anyway, you guys just heard some theology. God bless.